Welcome to an overview of E-Squared Inventory Management. This video will go over the basics of inventory management and also show you how the software actually works. This software is designed for small and medium-sized businesses. It offers many of the same features that larger retail and warehousing operations use. However, these are more simplified and efficient versions of them that are really designed for small to medium-sized business. While inventory management is designed to work for basically any small to medium-sized business, there are a few aspects of the software that are designed around online sellers specifically. An example would be in the item viewer, there are search eBay and search Amazon buttons that will drastically increase the listing speed for eBay and Amazon sellers. There are also two different inventory styles, one of which is designed around used inventory, while the other one is designed around new inventory. With that in mind, we're going to briefly cover the two different inventory styles. However, before I explain that, it's important to understand how inventory management works. Inventory management adds information about an item, such as quantity, specifics on the item like size or condition, anything like that. It adds that information into your inventory and attaches it to an item number or SKU number. That SKU or item number is how the software is going to identify that item going forward. If you want to look up your item, you're going to put in that item number. Also, when item number or SKU is discussed in this video, and also as you see it in inventory management, those two terms are interchangeable as far as inventory management is concerned. Item number is probably a better term if you're dealing with used inventory. SKU is probably the better term if you're dealing with new inventory. However, anytime you see it, you'll normally see item number / SKU. Either way, it means the same thing. So as I mentioned earlier, E-Squared Inventory Management offers two different inventory styles. The first type is SKU driven, which is designed around new inventory. The second is item driven, which is designed around used or unique inventory. And by unique, I'm talking about things like art, crafts, things like that. The main difference between the two types of inventory is the ability to add to an existing SKU. In a SKU driven inventory, you will typically add quantity to an existing SKU, and that SKU will exist in your inventory basically forever. Even when that SKU reaches 0, it will typically remain in your inventory because you will probably get more of that SKU in. An item-driven inventory is based around the idea that every item that comes in is likely unique. Even if you get two of the same DVD in, more than likely those two DVDs are probably in different conditions, have different characteristics, and therefore you want to enter them in separately. Each one would have a different item number or SKU. If your business has a mix of inventory, in general, it's best to go with whatever you have more of. So if you sell more used items, I would suggest going with an item-driven inventory system. If you sell mostly new items, then a SKU-driven inventory system is probably better suited for your business. If you want more information on the two inventory types, take a look at our support page. There is an inventory management guide there that will go through the two different inventory styles in a whole lot more depth and give better examples. So with all of that out of the way, let's talk about how the software actually works. You can add inventory in two different ways. You can either add items into a PO and then check that PO in item by item, or you can manually check in items in one simple step. There are benefits to both. You potentially gain accuracy by entering items into a PO first and then checking in that PO, because you could put that PO in either when you first receive the order, or you could potentially even put that PO in as soon as you actually place the order. And you can put in exactly what should be on that order, and then when that order comes in, you can use the PO check-in process and actually go through and validate, here are all my items, enter in the information about them, and attach them to a SKU. So first I'm going to go through the PO entry process and then the PO check-in process, and then after that we'll discuss the manual check-in process, which is faster, but you don't get that extra validation. So if you click on PO entry, this screen is going to be displayed. You're going to have a place for an order number, which can be the actual PO number. It can be an auction number that you bought it from. It can be anything you want. It's just simply a way for you to reference that order. Like the order field, the type field is also there to use as you want. The type is basically the inventory type you're adding in. So in the example I'm going to use clothing types. So tops, bottoms, socks, shoes, things like that. It could just as easily be types of auto parts or types of electronics. You can use this field however you like. By default, as you enter a new type, it's added to the type list. That is a setting you can change, so if you only want to be able to enter types that are already in the list, you can choose to do it that way. But normally, if you put in a type that's not already there, as soon as you hit add item, that type is now going to be in that list. Same is true for the item name. When you enter in a new item and hit add, that item will then show up on the item list. That item field does depend on the type selected, so if you select shoes, you're only going to see shoes. If you select tops, you're only going to see tops, and so on. In the cost field, you can either enter the actual cost or the estimated value. If you use estimated value, at the end when you enter in a price, it's going to use that estimated value to calculate a cost for each item. For example, if you bought a box of 10 different items in an auction or something like that, and each one had a very different value, if you enter in the total price you paid for that box at the end, it's going to fairly accurately come up with a cost for all of the items in that lot. And that total cost of all those items will add up to whatever you entered in at the end of the PO. That's one benefit to using the PO process, is you can use it to calculate a cost if you don't actually have a cost. Obviously, the quantity is just the quantity of that item that you're inputting. Once you fill out one item, you hit add, it's going to add it to the list on the right side. When you're finished entering items into the PO, you can click the complete PO button on the right side. It'll ask you to confirm, you hit yes. It'll then ask you for a price. Once you've entered in the price and hit OK, it will finish out that PO. Now that we've completed that PO, we can now go to PO check-in, and that will actually take us through adding those items into inventory. At the top of PO check-in, you'll see a drop-down menu where you can choose the PO that you entered. After that, there's the item field where you can choose the item in the PO that you want to check in. The type at the right side will fill out automatically based on what you entered in the PO. The quantity will also match whatever you entered in when you put in the PO. The condition will either default to new or acceptable depending on your inventory style. It will default to new for SKU driven inventory. It will default to acceptable for item driven inventory, so you can use the condition drop down and choose the current condition of the item. The description field is basically a catch-all. Any information that you can't put in anywhere else, or any notes you want to make to yourself, or really anything at all. The item number or SKU field is either where you're going to manually enter in your item number or SKU that you want to use, or it will automatically be filled out. You can update this depending on your settings, and if you're using a SKU driven inventory, you can actually change this to an existing SKU and add inventory to that. The location field is an optional field. You can use a simple location, you can use a complex location, you can use no location at all. You can scan items to a temporary location and then move them later. However you want to use that field, it's really up to you. On the right side, you'll see custom fields. Those are fields that you can set up. You can set up the name and the entries in the list. So I have those set up right now for gender, size, things like that, things that are specific to the clothing example I'm using. However, you could use make and model if you were selling car parts. You could use something like author if you sold books. Later in the video, I'll discuss how to set those fields up. However, there are 10 fields total, and you can use them however you like. When you've finished entering in information, you can hit add, and the item will be added to inventory. Depending on your settings, you may also get a pop-up that will tell you the item number. Otherwise, you'll need to make sure you look at the left-hand side and get down your item number before you proceed. As soon as you hit add, it will go to the next item on the list. That previous item will have been added to inventory. Using manual check-in, you can also enter in items in a single step. The only difference between the PO check-in and the manual check-in screen are that the cost and PO fields can be changed. Other than that, the two screens work exactly the same. You just enter your item information and then you hit add, and it will add the item to your inventory in a single step. Before we look at some of the other options, since we just looked at item and type fields, I want to go down to table maintenance and talk a little bit about that. The table maintenance on the main screen, the bottom right side, that is where you can manually modify items in that type field or items in that item name field. If you open the inventory types table, you will see the list of types that you have entered. If you want to add a new item, you can put in a new item. In this example, I use jackets, and I put a number 4 beside it. That number 4 is the order, so you can see at the top it starts at 0 and it works its way down to 4. Pretty much every time you add an item, just go ahead and put a number next to it, whatever the next number would be. You can also change up the order of the items on your item list or your inventory types list by changing that number. You can also go to the inventory items table and you'll see a list of the item names and the types, as well as, again, a number field. If you want to add an item to that list, you can put in the item name and then the type that it should be under, and then the number that it should be, whatever the next number is, and that will add it to that list. And it works exactly the same way with the condition and location fields. The next item on the menu is the relocate SKU option. This one is pretty straightforward. In the top field, you can put in an item number or SKU. Then you can press either enter or the tab key to go down to the next field, and it will automatically fill out the current location. In the bottom field, you'll be able to select a new location. Once you select a new location and hit confirm, it will move that item from the current location to the location you selected. And that's basically everything there is to know about relocate SKU. The next option we're going to discuss is adjust inventory. This is the tool you'll use to make any modifications you need to make to an item that's already in your inventory. This screen looks very similar to the manual check-in screen as well as the PO check-in screen. At the top of the screen, you're going to put in an item number and hit find. After you hit find, it's going to pull up that item's information. Every field except for the bottom adjustment information fields will be filled out. You can make any changes you want to the item here. If you go down to the adjustment information, you can add in some kind of an adjustment note and also pick an adjustment type. This is really for your reference. You can actually modify the adjustment type fields there if you want by going into settings. Once you've finished making the changes you want to make, you can click on update, and that will update the item in your inventory. Also, if you go to view adjustment history, you will see a record of any adjustments you make. In the adjustment history, you'll be able to see what the field was changed from and to. You'll be able to see the adjustment type, the adjustment note, and also the date. So if you ever need to check on a change that was made, you can go to the adjustment history and you should be able to see that change. One thing we haven't covered yet are custom fields. As I mentioned earlier, custom fields can have a custom name and a custom list of options. You can set up a custom field by going to Tools and then Update Custom Fields. In the custom field screen at the top, you can select the custom field you want to change. In the name field, enter the name you want displayed next to the field. The must be in list option determines if the user has to select an item in the list or if they can enter in any item they want. So if you had 5 colors in a menu and you had must be in list set to yes, they would have to choose one of those 5 colors. They could not enter in a color other than that. If you set it to no, then it still shows that list of colors, but then they could enter in their own color as well. In the values field, you'll go ahead and enter in each value that you want displayed in the list. Separate each one of those with a comma. Once you've finished updating the custom field, hit add update, and that will set up that custom field. Then if you go into check-in or inventory adjustment, anything like that, you're going to see your custom field displayed there. The next thing we're going to cover is the add sales info option. If you go into add sales info, you can put in a SKU or item number from an item, and then once you put that in and either hit tab or hit enter, it will then display some information about the item, including the name and the quantity. You can change the quantity, so if you only sold part of that item or SKU, you can change that quantity to something less. You can then enter a tracking number, a carrier, and a sale ID. The sale ID can be anything you want. If you don't fill out the sale ID and you have the option checked to automatically fill it out, it will automatically generate a sale ID using the current date and time. You can also fill in the sale price, the tax paid, the shipping paid, and then your actual shipping cost. Once you've finished entering in your sales info, you can hit confirm and it will add that to your sales history. It will also reduce that quantity from the quantity in your inventory. If you happen to be using marketplace tools, any sales you make on eBay or Amazon will have sales info automatically added in for them, depending on your settings. Up next, we're going to talk about the item viewer. The item viewer is a tool where you can enter your item number or SKU and hit find, and it will quickly display all the information about your item. This can be particularly useful for online sellers or anyone trying to list an item for sale. Not only do you have all your information in one place, but there are also search eBay and search Amazon buttons up in the corner. Those buttons will do a search on either site for the current item you have open. This can allow you to quickly check prices. Also, if you're listing on eBay, you can use the sell similar option and quickly list an item for sale. At the bottom of the item viewer, you have two status fields. One is the actual status, which you can choose from the drop down. These can also be maintained in settings. There's also a status note where you can enter any information you want to enter about the current status of the item. If you change the current status and want to update it, you can click on the update button in the bottom right corner, and that will update the status of the item. If you're using Inventory Management Pro, you may also see some information at the bottom of the screen. If the item is currently up for sale on eBay or Amazon, you'll be able to see the current active price. If the item has already sold on eBay recently, you'll see the last sold price and the last sold date. Okay, so now we're going to talk about settings briefly. I'm going to go through these very quickly. If you want a more in-depth overview of what all the settings do, please look at our guide on the website. If you go to support and then the inventory management guide, that will go through the settings in more depth. On the main screen, you have assign SKU. This is the field that determines that item number or SKU field, if that number is automatically filled out, if it simply fills it out but you can change it, or if it's completely a manual entry. If it's set to auto, you cannot change that field. If it's set to suggest, you can change that field, but it will be filled out for you. If it's set to manual, you'll have to enter in your own item number or SKU every time. The prefix is just the starting 2 characters or 2 digits of your item number or SKU. The SKU length is just the length of the item number or SKU. The last section only applies if you're using Inventory Management Pro, so if you're using Marketplace tools as well. That number of days is the number of days of sold history that it's going to try to pull every time the software runs. So if you're having issues with it taking a while to run, you can set this lower, and that may improve load times. On the next tab under item entry, the first field is the location field, and it determines if the location is optional or required. The next option determines if PO is required in the manual check-in screen. PO total price determines if you're asked for a total price at the end of a PO. Value type determines if, when you're entering a PO, if the value that you put in under cost is the cost per unit or per line. So if you enter a PO with 5 pairs of shoes on it and you have that set to per unit, it assumes that the cost is per pair of shoes. If you have it set to per line, it assumes that the cost you enter is for all 5 pairs of shoes. The Marketplace tab has only one option, and that's sold status. That simply determines on the dashboard what status it includes as being sold. So if it's set to shipped, then it only starts counting inventory once it's shipped. If it's set to all, then it includes items in every status. So even if those items haven't shipped yet, it still considers those items to be sold. Again, this only applies to Inventory Management Pro. On the next tab, you have the database paths for the Inventory Management database as well as the Marketplace Tools database if you have that set up. In the Update List Items section, you can determine if the type, name, and location fields accept entries that are not already in the list. If you have that set to yes, it will accept a new entry and add it to the list. If it's set to no, then it will not add the item to the list, but it will still accept any new items put in. So if that's set to no and you have a type that's not in your type list, it will still allow you to put in that type, but it will not add it to the list for future use. If you have it set to in list, then any entry made must be in the list. So if that type is not in the list, it won't let you put it in. It will give you an error message and you'll have to choose a new type. The required field options at the bottom refer to fields in the Add Sales Info screen, so it determines if the carrier, tracking, and sale ID are optional or required. Also, the Generate Sale ID checkbox determines if you don't put in a sale ID, if it will automatically generate a sale ID, which it does by using the current date and time. The next tab is the Advanced tab. The first item in the Advanced tab is the Status list. This status list is the status you see in the item viewer, so you can modify this list and add new entries, each one separated by a comma, or modify the items already in this list in order to create a custom status for your items. The Inventory Adjustment list allows you to add entries to the inventory adjustment list you see in the inventory adjustment screen. The Inventory Management style determines the type of inventory we talked about at the beginning of the video. Normally this should not be changed after setup, but in the event that you do need to change it, this is where you would do so. The Use Inventory History option determines if you're going to use inventory history, and what that means is after an item is reduced to 0 in your inventory, it can be moved to the inventory history table and out of your inventory table. This allows you to run reports faster. It allows the program to respond faster. Using a SKU-driven inventory, this is by default set to no because you have fewer SKU numbers, and also you want to keep those SKUs that do empty out and get reduced to 0 around for the next time you get that inventory in. In an item-driven inventory, when almost every item is a new SKU, you probably want this set to yes, and then using the field on the right, you can determine how long it takes for an item that has been reduced to 0 to be added into the inventory history and removed from your inventory table. The next setting is the use location setting. If this is set to yes, then you will see the location field in the check-in screen and the item viewer and things like that. If it's set to no, then that field will be disabled and you won't use location functionality at all. The last tab is the reports tab. This video isn't going to spend a lot of time on the reports. If you want more detail, you can look at the guide. However, you can select new report, you can put in a report name, you can use a variable. The first part is the actual variable that's going to be replaced below. The second part is the prompt that the user is going to get. All of that's surrounded by parentheses and separated by a comma. So in the example I have str my SKU, which is what's going to be replaced below. I also have enter SKU, so that's what the user is actually going to enter. So once they hit run report, it's going to ask them to enter a SKU. They're going to put in the SKU. The software will then take that SKU they entered and replace the question mark str my SKU question mark with the SKU they actually entered. In order to use custom reports, you will need to know some SQL. And that concludes the overview of inventory management. If you're looking for any more information on any of our software, please check out our other videos or our guides on the support page, and they should be able to provide you with any additional information you're looking for. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your interest in E² Software.